Story 1. I saw Mercedes blocking my side of the garage, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I just stopped by home to get my phone. It's amazing how dependent people have become on their phones. I had notes for the 10 o'clock meeting and wanted to ensure I was ready. Under normal circumstances, I would never have been home at 9:50. On the other hand, my wife is a stay-at-home mom with a child. I sent her a message to see if she was busy, and she replied that she was at the library. She couldn't hand me the phone, so I made the 15-minute trip back home. I was wondering whose car it was. When I entered through the front door, since she was at the library, there shouldn't have been any guests. I guess I'm a fool because when I went to my bedroom to get my cell phone, I saw my wife in bed with another man in the guest room. I was paralyzed for a moment but calmed down and quietly took out my phone with the intention of taking a picture for the divorce. However, I changed my mind as rage overcame me. I grabbed the guy by the hair and pulled him away from my wife. I shouted at him as I kicked him to the floor. I spat at my wife and left the room, deaf to her screams, begging me to stop and pleading with me to wait. The Mercedes was blinking in my driveway when I opened the trunk. I quickly looked for something suitable and chose a heavy metal jack. That's enough, I told myself, and began smashing all the windows, headlights, taillights, and doors of the offender's car. Then, calmly, I returned to the trunk, threw the tool inside, and wiped the sweat from my forehead. At that moment, my neighbor, Jayater, came out to see what was happening. I waved to him as I walked away from my driveway, ignoring my wife, who screamed at me to stop and let her explain everything. We had been married for 2 years, but we had been dating throughout college. Our son, Sebastian Jr., was 13 months old, and suddenly I realized I would be paying alimony forever. I couldn't believe my world was falling apart. Then the phone rang. I pulled into my office parking lot and organized my thoughts for the meeting. I met with the owners and my immediate supervisor about remote work for employees. This would save the company thousands of dollars in rent every year, but they were against it because they lacked foresight. I was determined to change their minds. I ignored calls from my wife and, surprisingly, from her sister, and sent notes to myself via email. I left my phone on the seat and went to make my presentation. I sat in my office corner and sighed with relief. My neighbor, Bet, peeked in and asked, "How did it go?" I smiled. The meeting went great. I think we'll be working remotely by Christmas, but my life's down the drain. What happened? Bet asked. I went home and saw my wife with some idiot. My marriage is over. Bet seemed to smile slightly. God, you're harsh. Yeah, that too, I replied. The landline rang and it was my wife. I thought she'd keep bothering me, so I answered. Please, don't bother me at work anymore. Sebastian, no. You made a mistake. Yes, I made a mistake when I married you, I said and hung up. I furrowed my brow. No, for God's sake, listen to me. It wasn't me at home. I was at the library, it was Scarlett. I laughed. Why would Scarlett use our house? Esteve works from home. Esteve had been her husband for 6 months. Could it be true? Could it have been Scarlett, not my wife? Try it. Prove it was Scarlett, I said. I replayed the entire scene in my head, but nothing helped. How can I do that? She asked, pleading with me to believe her. Did you abandon us when you made this mess? I slammed the phone down on its base. Bet asked, are you okay? She says it was her sister, I laughed. They're twins. I nodded, but inside I felt like a zombie. Should I go home, look for a hotel, or expect an ambush from my wife, her sister, and their mother? When I returned home at the usual time, I saw that Scarlett and Beret, my mother-in-law, were already there. Beret could pass for a triplet with her daughters, except for the additional 20 years of experience etched on her face. I walked into the house and they all started talking at the same time. I raised my hand to stop them. Quiet, all of you. I walked over to little Sebastian Jr.'s playpen and picked him up. How are you, baby? I tickled him and his laughter brought a smile to my face. I was worried about losing him after the divorce and who might replace me. Would they think of me as his dad, or would someone else take that role? It broke my heart. A tear rolled down my cheek as I sat on the couch, watching little Sebastian crawl away quickly. The 3 women looked at me expectantly like vipers ready to strike. All right, I said. Where's Esteve? Why does Esteve have to be here? Scarlett asked. I knew it was Scarlett because she had a mole on the back of her hand. I hadn't noticed her hand this morning. I was a fool to leave without letting her explain. Well, if it was you who slept with this man in my guest room, he deserves to know. I won't tell Esteve. Scarlett hoped to keep this between us, but I laughed. Do you expect me to believe it was you and not my wife? I laughed again, harder. Do you expect me to believe it was you and not her? Beret intervened. Come on, let's not ruin marriages over this. My marriage was already ruined. The only thing that could fix it was Scarlett confessing to Esteve about her infidelity. The women gasped and my wife began to sob. Beret defended her daughters, saying Esteve was too good to know the truth. Wait a minute, I said, I need to change. I'll be back. When I reached my bedroom, I called my father-in-law, Dale. You need to come to my house right away, I said. I've got trouble here and I need your help. Dale should have arrived by now, so I headed downstairs, grabbed 2 beers and looked at the women who whispered among themselves. Dale walked in without knocking, as was his usual habit. I handed him a beer. What's going on, Sebastian? He asked. I explained the situation. I had found my wife with a man and now they were trying to convince me it was Scarlett. Scarlett refused to tell Esteve even though it could save my marriage by destroying hers. Dale agreed. What does Beret think? I sighed. She seems to believe it's best to move on without telling Esteve. Dale's anger grew. If I even think you knew something or supported this, Beret, you're out. Bring Esteve here. He deserves to know if his wife was unfaithful. A pleading look appeared on my wife's face as she turned to Scarlett. Scarlett stood up, shook her head, and said, I'm sorry. I won't tell Esteve. You're going to ruin my marriage to save yours, my wife screamed. Get out or I'll tell Esteve everything. Scarlett laughed. Do you think he'll believe you? You're desperate to save your marriage and will lie to ruin mine. Girls, stop it. Dale interrupted. The only thing that will save your marriages is the truth. Scarlett smiled and left the house. Dale looked at me curiously. She's gambling that without clear evidence, Esteve and I will doubt who's telling the truth. By allowing Scarlett to use our house, my wife betrayed me even if she didn't cheat herself. They're twins. How can I trust her? My wife ran to the bedroom, sobbing. Beret followed her, but Dale stopped her, threatening to kick her out if she supported the deception. I picked up Sebastian Jr. from his high chair, kissed him, and prayed things would somehow resolve. While my wife didn't physically cheat, her actions in allowing Scarlett to use our home broke my trust. I tried to sort through my emotions while feeding Sebastian and putting him in his playpen. I sat on the couch, going over the events, but nothing could erase the image of what I'd seen. I was interrupted in my thoughts by the ringing of my mobile phone. Hello, Bet, how are you? Nothing. No progress or regression. I'm desperately trying to figure out how I can find out for sure which one of the two it was, but I'm stuck in uncertainty. I'm really sorry, Vas. You don't deserve this. If you need anything, I'll be there right away. All right, Bet. Thank you. See you in the morning. I ended the call and thought about how good it was that Bet cared about me. We've been friends since we started working on the same day 2 years ago. Her workspace was next to mine, and since the office was open, our computers faced each other and we looked at each other almost all day. She was a pretty girl, a bit plumper than Scene, but she had her charm and often hinted at things and used ambiguous expressions during the day. If Scene was tall and slender, Bet was petite and curvy with long red hair that she constantly brushed aside during the day. Vas, Scene said from the stairs. Yes. I swear on our son's life. It was Scarlett. You have to believe me. Believe in my love for you. How? How can I believe you if it wasn't you? Why did you let your sister do this in our house? You messed up, Scene. I don't see a way out of this for us. She was sitting on the stairs and sobbing. I knew I had to do something for sure. So I called Esteve. Hello, Vas. Hi, Esteve. Did Scarlett tell you about today's drama? She said she was going to see a friend. I haven't seen her since breakfast. Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I caught one of our wives in bed with a man in the guest room this morning. Initially, they claimed it was Scarlett, but when I said I would tell you, Scarlett backed down. They left everything to each other's conscience, trying to save themselves. You must be joking, he yelled. I'm not sure. I didn't open the garage, just saw the Mercedes. And no, I've never seen him before. Thanks for telling me, Vas. I'll look for her and see what she says. I'll let you know. Thanks. Scene continued to cry on the stairs. You shouldn't have told him. Don't you understand? You can't play like this while you're married and not suffer the consequences. If it was her, she needs to suffer. I don't understand how you thought you could say it was her and that you'd never tell Esteve. This would have never happened. We know you don't like Esteve, another reason I think you're playing with me. I can't believe you've done this to us. We have a baby. Little BS started crying because of my shout and Scene went to comfort him. I felt like crying, but I refused to shed tears in front of her. She was a wonderful mother. When we started dating, she admitted that she didn't care if I worked or not. She wanted to be a mother and have 3 children. She wasn't the type of person to have secret affairs. It wasn't in her nature. She was devoted to me and little BS and never showed even a hint of unhappiness. I think the same was true for Scarlett. Although she was more sociable than Scene, if you had asked me, I wouldn't have believed she could do this to Esteve. The next morning, I called my father. How are you, Sebastian? How's my grandson? Fine, Dad. Listen, I need your help. Everything's okay. I need to hire a private investigator. I explained what had happened. My parents had money and could afford to help me pay for the services of a private detective. Plus, Scene managed our accounts and I didn't want her to see the payment. My father went a step further and hired a private investigator to look into Scarlett as well. In his opinion, it was worth trying to save my marriage. Sebastian, he said, no matter what we discover or don't discover, your son should come first in every decision you make. You do understand that, right? I sighed. Yes, it's the only thing preventing me from divorcing her right now. All right, son. You may have to swallow some pride and self-esteem. I know it's a tough choice, but it's part of what makes a man. No matter what anyone tells you, the child is the most important thing. I know, Dad. I ended the conversation feeling worse than when it started. I sat at my desk and saw that Bet had already joined our morning call. I noticed she had put on makeup and chosen an outfit with a beautiful neckline. I wondered who the lucky person was she was dressing up for. I assumed she had a date after work. I joined the conversation and saw a message from Esteve on my phone. She said she wasn't at your house. I'm not sure if I should believe her and I'll be mad if she lied. Good luck. Yeah, good luck. He was in the same situation as me. What should we believe in? Bet sent me an instant message with a question. Is everything okay? I looked at her and shook my head. No. She frowned and we resumed our call. As soon as it ended, she asked, are you having lunch today? I'll treat you to cheer you up. I'm not the best company, Bet. Thanks for the offer anyway. Oh, I won't allow you to sink into misery. You don't deserve this. I didn't think I deserved a wife like her, but here I am. She shook her head and grumbled, any woman who betrays you is foolish and doesn't deserve you. Thanks, Bet. The detective asked me to fill out some forms and a couple of questionnaires and to send him some photos. I spent my lunchtime on it, so I managed to avoid having lunch with Bet. I told Esteve about the private investigator, and he was excited. He filled in the parts of Scarlett's questionnaire that didn't have answers, her daily routine, and so on, and returned everything to the investigator to start working immediately. I hoped he could tell me quickly if it was Scarlett and not Scene. I knew I would go crazy every day if I didn't find out. He said it might take a couple of weeks to figure something out. I wondered why I hadn't heard anything about damaging the guy's car. I hoped to receive a call, at least from the insurance company, and worst-case scenario, from the police. I got home and saw that Scene had gone to swim classes with little BS. So I messaged the detective that everything was ready for the installation of cameras. He came and went in less than half an hour, and I made dinner for myself. When Scene got home, I asked her, who was that guy? What guy? The guy you were with. Don't pretend. I told you it wasn't me. I have no idea who you were dating. I called Scarlett and put her on speaker. Hi, Vass. Who was that guy? The guy you found in your guest room. I have no idea. One of you is lying and I'm going to find out who. I hoped one of them would let slip some information no matter how insignificant. It didn't matter, a private detective knew about the car damage and checked the body shops in town. He would find out soon enough. A week went by, there was no news from the private detective, nothing changed in my situation, and Scene did everything she could to show me she loved me. That was becoming obsessive, inviting me to lunch every day. I realized what she was doing and put an end to it. She would have to wait for me to divorce before she could claim me. One morning, I passed by Starbucks and was quite surprised. I was in a drive-through line around the coffee shop and someone walked in front of my car to enter the store. It was that guy. I'll never forget that face. I left the line and parked. I stood behind my car and waited. After a few minutes, he came out and he didn't notice me until he was about 10 feet away. Hello, I said. Do you remember me? Listen, man, I don't want any trouble. She didn't tell me she was married. I approached him and said, answer a question and I'll let you go and you'll never see me again, okay? Buddy? Ask. Who did you sleep with? What are you talking about? He asked. You saw us. Who was she? I shouted. What was her name? I don't know her name. We met online, on a forum. I called her the Siren. He flinched as if I were going to hit him. I took a deep breath and asked, what's her phone number? I don't have a phone number. We communicate through private messages on the site. It was getting harder and harder not to hit him out of frustration. What kind of website is that? I asked. It's a community. She posts pictures there, some of them are intimate. We corresponded only once after that. She promised to pay for my car repair, and I told her I didn't want to hear from her anymore. I don't want any trouble, man. You better not get near her, or we'll meet again. Understand? Yes, please. I swear I didn't know she was married. He walked away, and I realized he was telling the truth. The most interesting part of that conversation was that he said she posted the photos. She may not have a name, but I have photos. I hope at least one of them shows her hands. I went to the forum page and called in sick to work so they wouldn't catch me looking at private images all morning. It wasn't hard to figure out, and soon I had my own username and joined the community. I was looking at pictures of attractive and not so attractive women, most of them cropping their faces. I found the Siren's post, and it was a common image in lingerie. I couldn't see her hands, but I didn't recognize the clothing, and for the first time in a week, I felt better. I clicked on the username and went to the Siren's page. There were photos, and I didn't recognize the room. They weren't taken in either of our houses. She must have been holding the camera with her hand with the mole because it wasn't in any of the photos. After going through dozens more photos, I started to get frustrated. I tried to identify the room, the clothing, any trace on her body. Even her lips resembled Scene's. I was baffled. The photos were at most 6 months old, so the timeline didn't help either. Scene had already lost weight after the pregnancy by that time and had no stretch marks or scars. Another dead end, and I was going crazy. I was so close to figuring out which of the sisters it was, and then I had a revelation. I went into the house. Scene was feeding our son. She asked, "Is everything okay, Vas? Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine. Could you make me some soup?" "Sure, honey. Sit down, it'll be ready in a minute." I saw her phone on the table and sent a private message to the Siren's user. I left the phone and waited. It was heartbreaking. Scene looked at me and asked, "Vas? I don't want to pressure you, but you're close to making a decision. I'm slowly dying every day without your love." I was about to tell her that I still loved her when my phone vibrated. I opened it and saw a message from the Siren. I broke down and cried like a baby, and Scene ran to me and hugged me. "What's wrong, Vas? What's happening?" "I love you so much, Scene. I would have died if it was you." "What are you talking about?" I told her about my morning and showed her the photos. She looked at them and laughed. "You're silly, but you're mine, Vas." "What do you mean, honey? You said you couldn't find any differences between me and these photos. You overlooked a big difference." I looked at the one on my phone and examined it closely. "I'm sorry, I just can't see it," I said, feeling stupid. "Oh, honey, look." She took off her yoga pants and underwear, and I started to laugh. "I can't believe how stupid I am." "It was all in vain," I said, laughing. I kissed her and asked, "Is it bedtime already?" She smiled and replied, "Oh yes. I'll see you in the bedroom." Scene had a small sun-shaped tattoo on her thigh that I didn't notice right away. However, not all our problems were resolved. While Scarlett didn't prevail, she allowed Scarlett to use our house, tried to justify it, and find excuses, but I didn't believe her. A few weeks later, I received a report from the private investigator saying that Scarlett had been dating several men in hotels. I gave the information to Esteve and he kicked her out. I told Scene that she needed to cut all contact with Scarlett, and she reluctantly agreed. She was already angry with her sister and didn't want to talk to her because of her lies, both to me and to Esteve, but she decided they would eventually reconcile. I didn't believe it. I told her that if I found out she was communicating with her sister, I would kick her out. It may seem harsh to some, but I believe it's the only way to protect myself. I talked to a lawyer about a postnuptial agreement, but my main concern was little BS, and in my state, custody cannot be included in a postnuptial agreement. As a result, I forced her to sign an agreement that gave me most of the assets and left her without alimony if she had an affair. She signed it without hesitation. Story 2. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I've been in a relationship with my soon-to-be ex-wife, who's 28, for 7 years. We were married for 5 of those years. We both had jobs that made us think kids weren't in our plans, but we had so many other amazing plans for our future. Throughout the 7 years we were together, we never had any disagreements about the direction we wanted to take or the goals we had for our future. Back in February, my wife started a new job, and that's when she met this guy, her coworker, who's 38 years old. After her 2-week training, she came home, and I noticed that she was chatting a lot with this guy. I've never been a jealous person, and I understand that our industry is male-dominated, so she's often surrounded by guys. I always trusted her and never questioned her loyalty or boundaries. However, I couldn't help but notice that she was texting this guy a lot in March. I brought it up twice, expressing my concerns, but she reassured me that he's just a friend and I shouldn't worry. They had common interests like being Christians, and they chatted a lot about the Bible. I'm not religious. She even said that she would stop talking to him if I felt uncomfortable, but I knew they were going for training together again at the end of March. I realized it would be impossible to stop her from talking to him, so I didn't push the issue further. I always made sure to check in with my wife to see if she was happy in her marriage or if there was anything I could do to improve things. I never received any negative feedback from her, and even as recently as mid-March, she was telling me that I was the best thing that ever happened to her. However, things took a turn when she left for a month of job training in a different location. In the first few days, everything seemed normal between us, but as the week progressed, we started to fight a lot. I'll admit some of it was my fault because I was going through some personal stuff and was feeling quite emotional, but there was something else bothering me too. She seemed distant and expressed some strange ideas about the future that didn't sound like her at all. This made me feel uneasy because we used to hardly ever argue about anything. I can't even remember the last time we had a big fight before April. It's been a confusing and challenging time for both of us. I felt really bad about arguing with her because I knew how important it was for her. The main issue we were fighting about was her not maintaining clear boundaries with this guy from work, and it was obvious to me that he was interested in her romantically. Then she brought up the need for space and time to think about our relationship and our future. She assured me that she still loved me, but things weren't the same anymore. I was confused, but I respected her request for space because I didn't fully understand what was going on. After a couple of days, she dropped the bombshell of divorce during a FaceTime conversation. It was devastating, and at that moment, I still didn't have a clear grasp of the situation, but deep down, I had a gut feeling that she might be leaving with this other guy. It's been a roller coaster of emotions and uncertainty for me. When she finally returned home in mid-May, I went to the airport to pick her up. As soon as I saw her, something felt off. She didn't even give me a hug after not seeing each other for a month and a half. When we got home, she didn't bother unpacking her luggage that first night. She looked me in the eyes and told me directly that she wanted a divorce and that she no longer loved me. It was incredibly tough and hurtful, but I was still holding on to the hope that maybe our arguments and my emotional ups and downs had contributed to her feelings, so I tried to work things out. But the very next day, she started acting differently. She claimed she wanted to clean the house and create nice memories for the last couple of days before she left. I sensed something wasn't right, and I felt like she was hiding things from me. So, for the first time in 7 years, I went through her phone. There, I discovered that even before she came back home, she was already in a relationship with that coworker guy, and they had even signed a lease to move in together. This was just a month and a half after she had left home at the end of March. She had told this guy that she was willing to give up everything to start anew with him. It was a devastating revelation, and it left me feeling even more hurt and confused. I still feel terrible to this day for going through her phone because it's something I had never done in a relationship before, and I felt like I had crossed a line. However, at that moment, I decided to take screenshots of her conversations with the coworker and acted like nothing happened just to see how far she would go with all the lies she had been telling me. For the following days, I kept asking her questions about her and this coworker, but I never got any honest answers. Finally, that night when we were talking, I got really frustrated and angry, and I started pressing her for the truth. She turned it around and blamed me for my own issues, saying that's why we could never be together. Even during our heated arguments, she continued to lie. Eventually, she decided to leave that night, and as soon as she was gone, I sent her all the screenshots I had taken and told her that I already knew everything. I admitted that I was testing her to see how far she would go with her deception. She then claimed that they only started their relationship after she brought up divorce, so she argued that it wasn't cheating. She also said that she had been wanting out of the relationship for a long time but was just waiting for the right moment because she perceived me as controlling and abusive. Seeing her leave and knowing it might be the last time I see her was one of the hardest moments in my life. I kept asking her to be honest with me and show some respect for our marriage. Until the very end, she had been an amazing wife for 7 years, and it's tough for me to understand how she could change so drastically in such a short period of time. I'm still left with a lot of confusion and questions. After she moved out, I didn't waste any time and hired a lawyer to file for divorce. She didn't want any of the belongings I got her, the house, the cars, or any financial support. She just wanted to end things. It's not a decision I wanted to make, but I couldn't risk her changing her mind, so I went ahead with the divorce process. I already have the signed paperwork back, so it's in progress now. It's been a tough journey, but I'm trying to stay strong and move forward. I wanted to make sure she learned a valuable lesson before I walked away for good. What she did was hurtful, and I was feeling really upset, so I decided to act without causing any harm to my own character. I gathered all the screenshots of her conversations with her coworker and put them into a PDF. Then I sent it to their boss. My hope was that this would help them understand the consequences of their actions and treat others with more respect in the future. And just like that, both of them got fired from the company. A perfect way to start their love story. Even though I'm still hurt by her cheating, I didn't want to stoop to her level and ruin my own reputation in the process. It's been 2 months since she told me she wanted a divorce, and I'm happy to say that I'm doing a lot better now. My soon-to-be ex has been trying to contact me, begging for mercy. She told me she's been having trouble finding a job since, and the guy she moved in with is having second thoughts on breaking up with her since he lost his job because of her. If she thinks I will help her in any way, then she's absolutely nuts. During this time, I've been trying to focus on myself and work towards building a new life and becoming a better person. I understand that neither of us was perfect, nor our relationship had its flaws, but what hurt me the most was how quickly everything changed. In less than 2 months, she went from being in a marriage to being in a new relationship and now living together with this person. It's been hard to grasp how all the memories we shared, the things we built together, and the plans we had for the future could seemingly vanish overnight because of someone new in her life. However, I've come to realize that dwelling on the past won't help me move forward. Instead, I want to focus on the positive aspects of my life and the opportunities that lie ahead. I'm learning to accept that some things are beyond my control, and I'm determined to create a bright future for myself. I believe that as time goes on, I'll heal and new adventures and joys will come my way. Story 3. So, before my girlfriend, 31, female, and I, 28, male, officially started dating, we were actually best friends for a good 10 years. We were part of the same friend group and practically spent every single weekend together, and even more than that. However, we never dated initially because she used to be in a relationship with one of my best friends when they were younger, and I thought it wouldn't be a good idea to pursue anything back then. Fast forward a few years, she broke up with my best friend and began dating someone else while I also got into my own relationship. Eventually, both of our relationships ended about 2.5 years ago, and that's when things got a bit complicated. We supported each other through our breakups and ended up hooking up after spending time together. As time passed, I developed stronger feelings for her and decided to take the plunge and ask her out on a proper date. However, she wasn't sure if she was ready for a new relationship despite telling me she had cut off all contact with her ex-boyfriend. I must admit I got a bit persistent and eventually convinced her to give it a shot, and that's how we officially started dating. In the beginning of our dating, I had a conversation with my girlfriend about her ex-boyfriend. I wanted her to know that I was okay with her being friends with him if she wanted to, as long as she was open and honest about it. I understood that they had spent a significant part of their 20s together, lived together, and had plans to get married. So I asked her to let me know if they ever reconnected in a significant way. I also suggested that she inform him about our relationship so there would be no confusion and their interaction would remain platonic. After a couple of months, I discovered that she was texting her ex, and this bothered me. We had a serious conversation about it, and she admitted that she didn't tell me because she wasn't sure why she did it either. I told her that I valued honesty and asked her to be truthful with me if it was innocent texting. I assured her that I could forgive her. To resolve the issue, I asked her to text him right then and there to let him know about our relationship. We managed to make up after that incident, but the problem was that her ex would still come up in conversations occasionally. Even when she was drunk, she would admit to missing him and feeling like he hated her because he never responded. I began to feel guilty, thinking I might have handled the situation poorly by cutting her off from someone in an unhealthy way. A few days ago, something happened that made me suspicious about my girlfriend's behavior, and it had been bothering me for a while. She was always very protective of her phone, and whenever I needed to use it for something simple like directions, she would get defensive. So, when she fell asleep while we were both drunk, I made a regrettable decision to go through her phone. To my shock, I discovered that she had been living a double life behind my back. She was seeing her ex-boyfriend regularly, even on days when she wouldn't meet me. He knew all the things about her life that she had kept hidden from me, and I was completely in the dark about their relationship too. The situation had become so convoluted that he believed she was living with her mom, but she was actually living in an apartment with her sister where I would often see her. Her sister, who I was also close friends with, was aware of everything that was going on, and to some extent, even her mom knew about it. The lies she told were constant, detailed, and carefully planned, deceiving both me and the other guy. It was a shocking revelation and left me feeling betrayed and hurt. Once I found out, I made her confront everything, and it all just blew up after that. It was a difficult conversation, and things quickly got out of hand. The revelation shocked our entire friend group, leaving everyone in disbelief and causing chaos among us. To add to the mess, her sister advised her to cut me off, while my friends suggested I do the same to her. As I confronted her, she tried to beg and plead for me to stay, claiming she didn't want to lose me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal and hurt. It's hard to fathom that the person I knew and loved for over 10 years could be capable of such deceit and lies. I mean, how could someone carry on with this charade, fooling me and leading a secret life for so long? It's like my reality has been shattered and I'm struggling to make sense of it all. I trusted her completely and now I question everything about our relationship. The fact that she could lie consistently day in and day out makes me wonder if I ever really knew her at all. As time went on, news of my ex-girlfriend's actions reached the so-called ex-boyfriend she had been seen with while we were still together. He was totally shocked and hurt when he found out about her deceit and the web of lies she had woven to keep both relationships going. He had genuinely been trying to rekindle their old romance, thinking she was single and living with her mom. He had no clue she was with me, living in a completely different place. When he confronted her about this situation, it turned into a heated argument and he called her a gold digger and a good-for-nothing cheater, and he too left. She lost not one but two relationships because she was being too immature, but it didn't stop there. Karma seemed to catch up with my ex-girlfriend in the following days. Her double life started to fall apart and the truth came out. Her lies and betrayal not only destroyed our relationships but also shattered the trust within her friend group. People were understandably upset and disappointed, feeling like they had been deceived too. As the truth became public knowledge, many people distanced themselves from her. Her deceit had a profound impact and it was tough for people to trust her again. The charm that once drew people to her now worked against her as they realized it had often been a facade hiding her true intentions. The process of moving on was gradual, but I surrounded myself with loved ones who reminded me of my worth and helped me see a brighter future ahead. Surprisingly, I haven't heard from my ex-girlfriend since the confrontation. It was as if she'd vanished from my life, and I must admit it brought a sense of relief. I was able to distance myself from the pain and confusion, and it allowed me to focus on rebuilding my life. Not only did I distance myself from her, but my friends also chose to cut ties with her. It was a difficult choice for them too, but they stood by my side and supported my decision to move forward. Having them as a solid support system during this tough time made a world of difference. As I reflect on the past and the lessons learned, I realize that I deserve someone who values honesty, trust, and respect as much as I do. Going through this experience helped me grow as an individual and understand what I truly want in a partner. It taught me that it's crucial to set boundaries and prioritize my own well-being. Now I can confidently say that I am in a better place emotionally and mentally. I've been focusing on my personal growth, pursuing my passions, and meeting new people who bring positivity into my life. While the healing process took time, I am grateful for the strength that it gave me to move forward. Though the experience was challenging, it ultimately led me to a happier and healthier state of mind. I've learned to value myself and trust my instincts. Today, I am more hopeful about the future and open to the possibility of finding someone who will cherish and respect me for who I am. Story 4. I, a 33-year-old male, met my wife, a 31-year-old female, 8 years ago on a dating app. At the time, neither of us was looking for anything serious. We were both young and wanted to make the best of our youth. But then we fell for each other, and all of that went out the window. We wanted to be with each other all the time, and things quickly got serious. I knew before she and I even met that my wife was polyamorous. At the time, it wasn't something I cared much about. I just went into our relationship thinking it was going to be a casual, fun time. I was definitely curious about what that was and how that worked in her life, but personally, I've always been monogamous. My wife told me one day when things started to get serious that for the first time in years, she was only thinking about one person, and that was me. There was a bit of a disconnect between us when we first started exclusively dating because I felt like I was taking something away from her through monogamy. However, she assured me that it was what she wanted. We had some ups and downs, but we were able to work it out to be together. Eventually, I proposed to her and we got married. Some of the people in my family were not at all understanding of polyamory, and they were practically betting that I would end up getting divorced before I was with my wife. I didn't know much about it, and I might have thought the same thing, but she explained everything to me in such a way that I understood what it was. I trusted that should she ever have any issues with monogamy, she would come to me and we could talk about them. About 3 years into our marriage, I got the opportunity of a lifetime for work. It required me to travel abroad for 3 months to do some on-site filming for an advertising agency. They were pretty much paying me to travel all over Asia, visit some of the best tourist sites, and take pictures, all expenses paid, including hotels, meals, and airfare, everything you can think of. After a long discussion with my wife, we decided that it was too good of an opportunity to pass up, and I agreed to take it. Of course, that meant that she would be alone back home while I was away, except for 1 week when she would be meeting me in Tokyo. Since our schedules aligned, I said goodbye to her and set off on my grand adventure. I had a great time. Every night, I would FaceTime with my wife and we would catch up. I had no fears that anything was going to happen while I was away. One night, I called her for FaceTime around 5 p.m. while I was in Thailand, which was around 8 a.m. in our time zone. Our typical call schedule had been just like that. I would call her in the evening when I got finished with all of my things, and she was usually drinking coffee in the kitchen when I did. However, this time she didn't answer at first. I figured that she must have slept late or forgotten to set her alarm, but deep down, I knew that was not like her at all. She had always been the kind of person to wake up at 7 a.m. without even needing an alarm to do so. Still, I didn't suspect that she was with someone else. I just texted her and told her that I missed her and loved her, and I would give her a call the next morning since we would both be busy or asleep. When I was finally able to get on the phone with her again, I asked her about what happened. It wasn't an accusatory question, it was more out of curiosity since it just wasn't like her. She got defensive with her answer and made it sound like I was insinuating something when I wasn't by any means. I ended the call before an argument started. That was the last thing I wanted while I was trying to enjoy myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her reaction that I didn't know about. Eventually, we made up and everything was fine leading up to her visiting me in Tokyo. She got off the plane and I was at the airport to pick her up. I was excited to see her. She was my wife and I loved her and missed her. It had only been 2 weeks since I last saw her, but the first thing I wanted to do was just go back to the hotel room and be intimate with her. When we got there, she told me she wasn't in the mood because she was a little bit jet-lagged from the flight. I completely understood where she was coming from, so I didn't want to pressure her into doing anything. So we both just laid down and talked for a while. Throughout the rest of the week, every time I would try to initiate something with her, she would come up with a reason to reject it. Whenever she would reject it, I wouldn't ask any questions or try to pressure her to give me answers about why she didn't want to be close. It did strike me as odd because she had always been the type of person who was very eager to have intimacy. The Tokyo trip ended for her and I still had 1 week left on my journey. It flew by and I couldn't wait to get home because I could feel that there was some distance growing between my wife and me. Everything seemed normal when I got there, but she still wasn't wanting to be close. After the first couple of days I was back, she started staying late at work and it honestly felt like she was actively avoiding me. At that point, I had let a lot of my insecurities about what was going on with our relationship pile up and I confronted her about it when she returned home. She told me that I was being obnoxious with my accusations. In fact, she ended up guilt-tripping me for why she was staying late at work. She told me it was because she had to take time off work to visit me in Tokyo as I pressured her to do. We got into a huge argument about that and I ended up sleeping on the couch. The following day, which happened to be a Saturday, she told me she had to go to work for some last-minute troubleshooting at the office. In all the time we had been together, she had never worked on a Saturday. I think it was at that point that I really thought something was going on. All the time that we had been together, we had never had any issues with her polyamory. But as soon as I started to think that something was wrong, it popped its head right up. I couldn't help but wonder if she had taken advantage of the time that I was gone and been with another person. For a while, I convinced myself that I was just exaggerating and purposefully trying to hurt my feelings by thinking things like that. I distracted myself by trying to clean up some of the house. As I was looking under our bed to pull out any old clothes or trash, I found a sock. It was only one sock, but it wasn't mine. I knew that, and it wasn't the type of sock that my wife wore. It was someone else's sock who didn't live in my house. That was the push that I needed to seriously consider that my wife was, in fact, cheating on me. I went to her office and looked through her desktop to see if there were any indications of who it was with or what she was doing while she was supposedly at work. There was no indication from any of her recent emails that she needed to go into the office for any reason, so that helped me realize that she had already lied to me. Her inbox seemed clean, but when I looked over her desktop and clicked on her recycle bin, I found some pictures and videos that she had deleted but hadn't cleared. My heart completely sank when I saw that. I recognized the man in the pictures right away. He was one of her coworkers. I had met him a few times at company gatherings and I always thought he was a bit chummy with my wife. I would make jokes about it with her and she would just laugh it off with me and tell me that he was married too, so I had nothing to worry about. I guess they both saw a prime opportunity to cheat on their partners while I was out of town. I emailed myself the evidence and immediately began looking for a divorce attorney. Right away, I started thinking of a way to get back at both of them for their betrayal. Knowing that my wife was cheating on me was one thing, but the fact that she was cheating on me with a married man and ruining 2 relationships knowingly was like a slap in the face. I looked her coworker up on social media and found his wife pretty easily. I sent her a message asking if we could set up a time to speak face to face since I had some news to share about her husband. She probably assumed the worst right away, but she agreed to meet me at a cafe. I saw her world crumbling when I told her, and I felt terrible. I felt the exact same way. I didn't want to let either of them just get away with their affair when they ruined both of our lives. I needed to come up with some way to get back at them. I spent the next few weeks pretending like everything was all right with my wife, and I encouraged the partner of her coworker to do the same. We both planned on leaving our spouses, but we wanted to get everything in order first. Both of us were going to surprise them with our divorce papers on the same day, so neither of them would have time to prepare. When everything was done, I brought my wife out to a lovely restaurant. She thought I was surprising her with a nice date. Toward the end of the meal, she asked me what prompted the gesture, so I figured I might as well tell her. I pulled out the papers and slid them across the table to her. She was shocked and hysterical. She tried to contain herself, but it really was quite the scene. Other diners were watching us while she started crying. I explained why and told her I saw the pictures and I wasn't going to be with a cheater. She tried to tell me I was misinterpreting them and that she hadn't cheated, but I didn't believe it. I just left the restaurant, leaving her to pick up the bill. We got divorced and now we're living separately and have no contact with each other at all. Funnily enough, her coworker's wife actually messaged me one day and asked to get together. We kind of hit it off. Things are still complicated because the wounds are so fresh, but there could be something there. Story 5. When I was 27 years old, I met my fiancée, a 25-year-old female, 4 years ago. I knew right away that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. She was everything that I had been looking for. We'd only been dating for a year when I proposed, and we've been engaged for 3 years. The long engagement has caused some trouble for us. One of the biggest issues is that she wanted to plan her dream wedding, which subsequently would cost us quite a bit of money. I've never been one to care about superficial things like that. I would be more than happy going to the courthouse, signing some papers, and then spending all of the wedding money on our honeymoon. However, she had always dreamed of her big day, and she wanted a big wedding with no compromise. It felt like every other week the budget we set aside for the wedding had increased, and she was telling me that she had gone over and was apologizing for it. At some point, I noticed that her apologies were meaningless because she continued to go over. We were getting into a lot of arguments, and there was a bit of resentment brewing between us. I'd had enough of her constant disregard for the financial constraints of the wedding, so I sat her down intending to have a calm, reasonable conversation with her. She was immediately very defensive and told me that she wasn't sure if she could be with someone who was controlling. I was upset that she had accused me of being controlling when all I was doing was standing up for myself when she was taking advantage of me. After the fight, she ended up leaving and staying at her friend's house for a week while we figured things out. Honestly, I thought it might have been the end for us. I was heartbroken. She was my dream girl and I cared so much about her. She eventually came back and we had a long discussion about the wedding. We both agreed that we still wanted to be together but needed to set some boundaries. We also agreed that we would move forward with what we had for the wedding and halt all further planning. That was the only compromise on the issue I would allow since we were already over budget by 50% and we had 150 people invited. We fell back into our old patterns with each other, and it seemed like our temporary break and discussion actually helped our relationship. The wedding was only a few months away and we were doing well. As we got closer to the wedding date, some of the stressors started to come back for us. My fiancée's coping mechanism with the stress was to throw herself into her work. She's a graphic designer and very creatively inclined, so it helped alleviate the stress. So instead of being home with me, she was at work. She started spending more and more time at work, which felt odd and unlike her. I was curious about why she was there so much, so I asked her one night when she came home. She just told me that it was a good way to escape and forget about all of it. I didn't understand why she still wanted to go through with a huge wedding if it was stressing her out so much, but I didn't ask about that. Around the same time, I noticed that she was wearing more makeup and more revealing clothes to work. I had nothing against her dressing in a way that made her feel confident, but she normally wore long pants, boots, and sweaters to work because she was always complaining about how cold she was while she was there. Suddenly, she was wearing sleeveless blouses showing cleavage and skirts. It was odd, but I tried not to worry about it. Honestly, I've seen a ton of those stories exposing cheaters, so a lot of the things she was doing were raising red flags for me. I needed to find out if something was going on before the wedding. I didn't want to be married to her and then find out she was with an ex or something after we were legally attached. I did some snooping on my own but didn't find anything. One thing I've always known about liars is that they're good at hiding their lies. So I justified hiring a private investigator to follow her. I reached out to someone who specializes in infidelity and they agreed to take the case. I could only afford to pay them for a few days because the wedding was depleting a lot of my savings. The first day, they didn't find anything. She went to work and went home with no issue. I thought that maybe I was overreacting, but my gut told me not to call the private investigator off. The next day, I was glad I trusted my gut. My fiancée texted me about midway through the day that she would be staying late at the office. She said that she was helping a coworker with some excess work they had before a due date. However, the evidence the private investigator brought back to me told a different story. They emailed me a file with videos and pictures of my girlfriend with her boss in his office having sex right on his desk while other employees were in the office. I just remember staring at the computer screen until it turned itself off. I was so shocked by what I saw. When I collected myself, I started to think about my options. There was absolutely no chance I was going through with the wedding, but I needed to figure out how to end it. I wanted a little revenge on her for cheating on me, and an idea hit me. So, before I acted on it, I packed up some of my stuff and texted my brother to see if I could stay with him. When I got to his house, I drafted an email to our entire wedding guest list. In the email, I told them all that it was canceled and attached the evidence of my fiancé's affair. Surprisingly, I got several responses back from relatives, coworkers, and friends about it. What surprised me the most, which I didn't even realize at the time, was that my fiancé's HR manager was on the list. She reached out to me and asked for details because it was something she was obligated to act on since it was clearly on company property. I told her everything I knew. My fiancé figured out I was with my brother and came to his house, banging on the door. She was fuming at me, but I stood my ground and ended it. I told her I was contacting the venue, vendors, and everyone else involved in the wedding and having all of my money refunded to me. I felt bad when she was crying in front of me, but then I remembered how she cheated on me and I didn't anymore. She and her boss were both fired for their inappropriate relations on the job. She tried to call me and tell me that I was still obligated to pay for the apartment even though I didn't live there, but I managed to work something out with the apartment complex to pay for 1 month and get off the lease. I think they were just willing to work with me because of the situation. My now ex-fiancée was forced to move out because she lost her job and couldn't afford rent on her own, having dumped what little she had in savings into a wedding that never happened.